nice to look out and see a good crowd of people here. I've been looking forward to this. John and I have known each other for a few years, I guess since high school or maybe a little before then, and I've shared some common interest with John through the years, and but there is sort of a I don't know his full story. I don't think any of us do, and that's what we're here for. So please welcome John Shoffner back to town.
Well, I don't think I've ever even thought through the whole story at once. The last time I've done a full review of this was, a background check for NASA or the FBI for some reason. People sometimes ask me about that. But growing up in Middlesboro was a fantastic experience when you stop and think about the opportunities we all had here. And it's going to be a wonderful time to have a chance to actually recount it here tonight. There are some real nuggets, some things that we all share together, because it is a tight community and a wonderful community. And growing up here in the 60s was absolutely fabulous.
All right, so let's begin at the beginning and the family. And when did your immediate family become part of of Middlesboro? When did you move to Middlesboro? I know you were not born here.
That's right. My dad was in the Air Force. I was born in Alaska, and I think we moved back here I was born in 1955. So we moved back in 1956. Came on a boat from Anchorage to Seattle, and then ended up here. And my grandparents lived here. My father's mother and father, and their family lived in Union and Claiborne County. That's the basic home for everyone. So I spent a lot of years playing in my grandparents' backyard here on 12th Street in Cumberland, where we had a golf station. It was, a big part of our heritage was terrorizing our grandparents, I guess, for lack of a better reason. But that was it. We came here, and my father went to work, I think, initially for his dad in that business, and then went on to do other things.
And how long did you wind up living in Middlesboro before moving away?
I was here throughout my childhood and through graduating high school. And then I came back. I had aspirations to go be an astronaut since I was 8 years old. The beginning of the space race was in the 60s, and that captured everyone's attention. It was hard not to fall in love with space as an 8-year-old in 1963. It was the thing. It's back today, and we'll talk more about that, but space drove everything that I like to do, and it fostered a love of science and all things considered throughout my life. It was a fabulous beginning for me. So I was here until I had aspirations to go to the Air Force Academy and be an astronaut.
Well, in those growing up years, can you describe what impact your parents and grandparents and your family in general had on shaping you and in your dreams and your terrorizing of grandparents?
Well, I was a difficult child to shape. I had always had my own notions of what was good for me. My mother always had a little bit of trouble containing that, I think. But she had a good spirit. She was always focused and knew that I wanted to, be involved in a lot of things. So I think it was more that than actual guidance. It was the liberty to be your own person that I enjoyed most.
So you were given the space and you took it, so to speak. This space, not that space. You took that later.
Yeah, I think that's important. There was the 50s and 60s in America was a special time, right? It was post-war. There was a lot of growth in America at that time, and families and people, had an expansive time It was a time of freedom and liberties, exploration as people and families and businesses. So Middlesboro was enjoying a good set of years of growth at the time. You know, it had had a very colorful past, right? Up and down and up and down. But the 60s was also a good time. You know, it was a very open community, easy to live.
And many of us here know you have siblings. You're one of 4, correct?
That's right.
And where are they these days?
Well, there's one right there, and there's one right they are here. They continue to thrive in Middlesboro, you know, as a lot of people have and are able to.
All right. But you're the one who wanted to go elsewhere. And how does that fit, do you think, with your background?
Well, I just wandered off, basically. How does it fit with my background? Well, I think it matches perfectly, to tell you the truth. You know, I have the ability to look back now and say, how did I get where I am and why? Not how, but why, more of the why.
Well, let's talk about the school system here and how that helped shape that and your need for additional education or training or you know, what was going to school here like? Let's just start with that. Well,
initially I went to Central School. I guess everyone remembers Central School. It was, you know, right next door, 2-3 buildings down. And this grand old building, just like the old schoolhouses, you know, that you recall. The playground was cinders from the furnace, you know, the clinkers. I mean, you fall down, you're going to the hospital. But it was, but that was what we understood as existing. You know, that was, you went to school to learn. We were there. We weren't there to play and be protected in the yard. We were there to learn. And even in the cafeteria, we had to learn. I learned a lesson in the cafeteria once. Remember, the cafeteria was in the basement. It had these ceramic tiles, and you would go there and get your tray, and you'd go and they'd put the food on your plate that they thought you should have, and you would go eat it. And then when you finished eating, you would take your tray to the trash can, where another cafeteria worker would take it from you and throw it in the trash can. But if they saw you didn't eat everything, they'd send you back to your table to finish it. Well, I thought I was pretty slick one day. I put my mashed sweet potatoes, which I couldn't eat, in my milk carton. I drank the milk. But they also check if you drank your milk. So she picks up the milk carton. It's still full, so she sends me back to the table to drink my milk. I'm not sure how that turned out. But I learned that from that lesson, you had to be a little craftier if you're going to win in the world today. You got to think a little one step further than that.
Well, as you got into high school, well, throughout your the years of getting an education in Middlesboro, how did your parents encourage you, for lack of a better term, to perform in school?
Well, every parent likes you to get a star, that famous star, you know, in a row, and it was always, we didn't have a problem in school. I think I always enjoyed school. I always enjoyed going to school. I didn't always enjoy all the things in school, but I was a good student. I didn't try extra hard. I just went and did my job in school. And everyone wants to impress their parents, and I was no different. You know, I wanted to get a good grade, and I was always, you know, sad when I saw the A minus. The B plus was okay, but that meant I needed to do something different. So I think we all did that. I think our parents taught us that it is important to put in an effort. And I think that lesson was seeded in all of us, you know, very early, that it's important to put in an effort. You know, it's not important that you do exactly what I don't know how to phrase this, I guess. It's more important to put in an effort than it is to do any particular one thing, whatever it is. My mom used to say that. Doesn't care what you do, just do it really well.
All right. And when do you feel like you first started thinking about not staying in Middlesboro like all your siblings did? Was it like in high school, did you see yourself winding up somewhere else?
I never saw myself, I was never anxious to leave, but I never saw myself there, if that makes any sense. I did not have a destination, but I always felt like I would be somewhere else at some point.
Well, you described that even going to the Air Force Academy, you had astronaut very much in mind at that time. So being an astronaut probably precludes life somewhere other than Middlesboro.
Oh, that's right. You would do the math, and that's what you would come up with. But I didn't do the math. I rarely did. In fact, going to the Air Force Academy was an interesting story in itself. I had this ambition to go, but the moment I got there, the goal was to go. I failed to have an exit strategy or development strategy from there. I had this one goal since I was maybe 10 years old, was to go and get a congressional nomination and to go. And once I stepped over that line and arrived at the Air Force Academy, I had no strategy. It was a strange feeling that somehow I knew the military life was not going to be for me. I knew that day too. So it didn't stick. I failed to read the headline that it is the Air Force Academy after all. That I was just going to go and magically become an astronaut.
It sounds like that's almost back to the mashed potatoes in the milk carton almost.
Yeah, there's a pattern. There's plenty of those. But that was kind of strange. And I feel it's a little embarrassing to admit to that at this juncture, but I went there without the full, complete understanding that I was going to be a career military person. And I looked around me at how that system operated, and I was way too much of a rebel for that. I just wasn't going to, I could not continue to be a part of that. So I let go of that goal and moved on.
And what was next?
You do what every college dropout does. You go home. And that seemed normal to me. I just stepped over that line and went to another chapter. Particularly that summer, the summer I returned home, two other friends of ours that live here in Middlesboro decided we would all move to Florida, the three of us, loaded up a Volkswagen Beetle, and went to Barstow, Florida to work for U.S. Steel in the phosphate mines. That's glorious. I mean, we didn't know what that meant, but we knew it was $5.50 an hour, which seemed like, PhD level pay at that point to us. So we loaded up, went down there, got an apartment, hated this job. My two friends wanted to leave a week later, but I wanted to stay. But I couldn't afford the apartment, so I called my mom. Mom, you got to send me some money. Bobby and Jimmy want to leave. And I said, I don't know if I can stay. She says, no, stay. It's an adventure. You don't know what you'll find.
You weren't expecting that answer, were you?
No, I was expecting money, so. But she gave me guidance that lasted the rest of my life.
Well, expound on that. That is interesting. So you stick it out, in other words.
Yeah. She convinced me that home was a place where I grew up, but there are other destinations that I should be willing to, and hardships, because I was facing this temporary hardship, money, being able to afford being there. And she said I should stay and figure it out.
And how long did you stay?
About 2 weeks. Well, I figured it out. That was the problem.
All right. You to get enough money to go home?
Yeah. I figured out that, I stayed, but, I just was still, apparently Florida wasn't my destination in life. So I came back.
So you're back in Middlesboro, and what would you say makes this town unique?
It's very comfortable, and it was for me growing up. We had freedom to do all the things we wanted to do. We lived and grew up on our bicycles. We traveled the city freely. If we were out too late and we ran into the police, they would look at us and just say, go home. And we sort of did. We'd take the long way home, but we would end up home. I don't think that happens easily today, and things are a little different. So we would spend our summers sneaking out of the house to go ride the street sweeper. That was the extent of our huge mischief, during our time here. So we had a culture here with all the families that we all know, and growing up, that was, we knew we were doing things our parents didn't want us to do, but we also knew we were not doing anything terrible. We were just being kids.
So what was next for you then?
Well, you still need money. We're back to that money question. Mm-hmm. At any age, you still need to grow up and figure out how to earn money. So I had grown up playing with wires and electricity and building things. So I was crafty, and I went to work in my dad's business. He had, as you know, a plastic company here. Started building things and exploring my own creativity there. He gave me the ability, the freedom to mess around. He didn't overmanage me at all. So I just used some of the life skills I'd created with electricity and wires and developed things, and had some form of ability that let me figure things out, if that makes sense.
Well, and you were referencing the plastics, and many of us here will remember Duraline, and Duraline changed its focus at some point in time there from being primarily a manufacturer of plastic water pipe and sewer pipe and the like, and it turned into something that was new tech. And can describe that process and what your involvement was there.
Well, here's a story no one knows. We made pipe for irrigation systems. And it's a challenging business, very competitive. And one day, and I worked in the manufacturing side, the back side, fixing things, being a mechanic. One day, does anyone remember the Thomas Register? That was the internet. That was the internet in print. Before there was an internet, before there was anything like that, there is this encyclopedic volume A to Z of every company in the U.S., organized by company alphabetically and then organized by products alphabetically. So if you wanted a product, you would go look at the product and find all the companies that made it. Or if you knew a company, you could see all the products that company made. It filled the entire shelf, just like an encyclopedia. Well, apparently during the mid-'70s, late '70s, AT&T had been developing with Corning glass something that they called fiber optics. This had not been used yet in the U.S. And then they first stepped out to deploy it commercially within the Bell system. It was still all one Bell system. They went to the Thomas Register because they decided that they needed a plastic pipe to protect this stuff when they put it in the underground. So they went to the Thomas Register, looked under P's for plastic pipe, tore out the page, copied it, and sent a letter to all 17 companies that were on this page. Well, Duraline was on that list. And the letter came into Duraline. And someone in Duraline looked at the letter and said, well, we don't do this. And the letter goes in the trash can. Well, I heard about this. And I said, wait a minute. This is the biggest, at the time, AT&T was the biggest company in the world, like Apple is today. They were quite literally the biggest company in the world. I said, this is the biggest company in the world asking the smallest company in the world how to do something. So this is different. So everybody went home. I went and fished this out of the trash can and answered the letter. Made up a name for myself and answered the letter. Well, then the worst thing in the world could have happened. I got an answer. and I was 26 years old. So what do I do now? So I ended up going to Chicago to meet with AT&T, downtown Chicago. And I'd never traveled anywhere in the world, outside of, on business at least. So what do you wear when you travel for the first time? And you don't have, I stopped going to church, so I didn't have a suit anymore. So my wife helped me find the best golfing pants that I had, these red plaid pants, and a shirt. It's the nicest shirt I had. And so I flew to Chicago with some drawings and ideas for AT&T. Actually, we did this at Illinois Bell downtown. And I remember standing in a room like this with a board and some sketches of what I made of how to answer their letter or what they wanted to have built. And there's a room full of engineers, just like you guys. And I watched them as I told them what I was thinking. And their eyes would look at me and look at my pants. Look at me and look at my pants. You could feel it. You could feel it. So we ended up with some questions, and they were curious about some of the ideas that I had. And I'm there totally on my own, mind you. And I'd actually even made up the name of a company and then still flew up there with nothing. And they said, okay, if you can answer this, 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 and can we do this? So on the flight home, I'm drawing on napkins, and I answered the questions that they had, and then we get an order. We had to deliver pretty quickly, so I had to go then to the company, to my dad, and say, okay, I've got this order. I don't know how to fill this order. I don't have a company. Can we do this? So we made tooling. I went to the shop, we made tooling, and that started our adventure with AT&T. And eventually that business quickly, within a year or two, grew bigger than the volume of the whole company within 2 years. And eventually started to unfortunately starve out some of the other legacy customers that we had because it was huge volumes. It just turned into huge volumes of business. So that was our beginning in 1981.
Well, growth happens, and how did you help manage that growth?
Well, in 1985, my dad, who had been pushing that business and doing a great job doing it, he kept the company alive through hard times, decided to exit the company and found us some financial partners that came in to help fund its growth. And I remained, of course. And they did a fabulous job for us. They funded all of our ideas and helped us find new markets. The phone kept ringing. It rang from Europe first, from England, and then the phone rang from Spain, and then it would ring from Israel, then it rang from India. It just kept going and going and going. So my job began, converted into answering letters out of trash cans to building factories in different countries. And
some of you may not be aware, the product that became known as Interduct
Interduct, yes.
Yeah, is what the fiber optic cable lays in to go underground primarily, I guess. Is that right? Although it doesn't have to be underground.
It can be underground or aerial, but the problem was the telephone companies for a century now had been putting large copper cables the size of your leg in large conduits underground. And fiber cable, which is the size of your index finger, replaced the entire cable. So they had to fill this space with multiple smaller conduits in order to support future fiber cables. So they needed a duct within a duct, and they called it an interduct.
Yeah, like a cross section, and there's two or more compartments, so to speak, inside the pipe, right?
Right. It's just like a whole bunch of, what's the spaghetti with the hole in the middle? What's the?
Oh, you got me.
Yeah. Take a whole bunch of those and put it into a bigger pipe, and that's where the ducts went into the ducts.
And then the pull string inside.
Yes, that was one of our inventions, actually. That was what AT&T asked me to try to do in that very first meeting. They said, now, if you can do this, you really have something. And that's what we kind of worked on really quickly overnight before replying on the very first order. That was one of our very first innovations for the industry.
And this is just occurring to me. Was there a patent involved?
Not on that particular product.
Okay. All right. Patents later on?
Yeah.
That had to be fascinating.
Yeah, the whole process is fun, and that's what really got me excited and set me free to, suddenly we had things that were working, and it's kind of like when, as you know, we're working in our schools today to try to bring exciting projects to kids to learn and get them excited to learn. And this represented a project that just got me excited. A big company asking a small company to solve problems for it. And it turned out that our products that we shipped and sold were about 2 or 3% of the total project cost of a fiber cable installation when they would do a cable installation between 2 central offices. Our product cost was about 2% of that whole budget. But if it didn't work well, for some reason, it was 100% of the problem. So we had to assure that our duct allowed the cable that they wanted to place, because fiber cable came in really long lengths and was only efficient if they used the entire length. If they had to splice it, it became inefficient because of light loss, and it was very expensive in man hours to splice. So they like to pull the long lengths, but it's very torturous underground. So they had to piece our duct together to make the entire route, but it had to be slippery. It had to have a low coefficient of friction. So we developed some processes that we were able to patent that lowered the coefficient of friction and allowed the cables to pull in extremely long lengths. And that was very valuable to the telephone companies.
I see a lot of problem solving occurring here, and I'm guessing the rewards from solving problems, and that has to be terribly satisfying.
It's fun. It's late nights. We had an awesome crew, and that was part of the growing up part of Middlesboro, and the people that worked at Duraline during those years, dozens of them, were just awesome people that would work all night, stay up another day to solve some of the problems and do some of the many things that we do in manufacturing. There's some of you here tonight that are in manufacturing, and you know that when you run into a problem in fabrication or something, you can't just quit and come back tomorrow. You have machinery running, you have temperatures up and running, you have processes in place. You have to stay on it. And we had people here, and the beauty of this area and the people in it were that they were just as dedicated to succeeding as the people in the company.
So as the growth occurred, there comes a time, and there did come a time, for you to exit. And what was that like?
Well, I knew it was coming. It was doing that in that part of my life was not something I chose to do. It was something that happened to me, that occurred. And that felt more natural for me to let things as they occurred in my life. If they were interesting and appealing, I enjoyed focusing on them. And that was one of those things that after 22 or 23 years, and we had built 13 factories in 13 countries or so, I was flying around the world every 6 weeks, basically just going in and out and having meetings, that the challenge was no longer there. I could phone that job in. It was fun. I loved the people. But I became ready for whatever was next.
And what was next?
Well, I do what everybody does when they leave their first long career. They go skydiving, of course. I had done a little bit of skydiving when I was in Colorado at the Air Force Academy very briefly, and I really loved it, and I always wanted to go back to that. So I immediately found a skydiving center close by, actually in La Follette, actually not too far away, and started jumping as much as I could, and within a year had broken both legs.
Certainly that's
You're
not
supposed
the
to
end.
laugh at that.
That's not the end.
That's not the end. No, well, I broke my ankle, and then about 3 months later, broke my left leg really badly. But it just, to me, that's just the nature of the beast. So you keep pushing. The doctor said you need to give it 6 months. So 6 months and a day later, I'm on the drop zone again. And on that day, I met my current wife, actually. I landed there after 6 months in Florida and, met the love of my life. So.
Great story, of course. Now, is astronaut still in the back of your mind?
No, but the love of space, the love of science, those are the things that I followed. Those are the things I read about. When I could get a hold of a telescope, I would still use that. So I didn't walk away from the fundamentals of that. I followed the shuttle program, Apollo, of course, but that was way behind us. I always aspired to that, and somehow I would like to think that I always thought that I would go to space. I didn't close it off completely, but it wasn't active. It was just, I followed it. I enjoyed watching it.
I'm just thinking of this. When John Glenn made the visit at, I'm not recalling his age now, to the space shuttle, did that relate to you in any specific way?
Well, it was John Glenn. He was very special. So you have to, whatever John Glenn wants to do or gets to do, that's because he's John Glenn, of course. So it did not indicate to me that, I didn't jump out of my chair thinking, well, I should go now too. But, at the time growing up, astronauts meant test pilot, military, things like this. Things that that were well behind me. So I wasn't particularly sad about it, but I always longed for it, watching them with some envy, the men and women that were launching at that period of my life on the space shuttle. We did have a second cousin actually, my dad's first cousin that was a shuttle pilot from Middlesboro. Actually, his family here, the Hammonds, Goldie Shoffner, daughter grew up here.
Cool, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Well, how did you become connected then to Axiom Space?
It was about 3 years ago, and my wife had heard me yap about space and astronaut stuff until she was sick of it for 20-some years. And we're having breakfast one morning, some coffee, and she stopped. She's looking at her laptop and she turned the laptop around and said, "Look, you can finally go to space." So, of course, I'm going to listen to the second part of what she's going to say. She turns the laptop around, and there's a news article of Axiom Space now developing private astronaut programs. So, what do?
You tell me.
Well, you really quickly, you whack out an email to Axiom Space. First thing, for me, I'm not a window shopper. I don't walk into the store unless I intend to walk out with what I walked in for. I don't go in to explore. I'm not a grazer. So I looked at this and had to think very carefully, because if I emailed this company that says they can put you in space, then I should have the full intention of doing that. So I thought about it for a day. Went through the process mentally and created an email, did not send it immediately, thought about it till the next morning, opened up the laptop and sent it. And then I sat there for 6 hours waiting for the reply. I fully expected to be rejected. Nothing happened. Another day went by, nothing happened. Another day, no response. Turns out nobody checks info@axiomspace.com, which is the only email. They had no phone number. It was a very early website when they were first getting started. So I was kind of lost, and it lingered, and I forgot about the process. And a month went by, and finally, I was in motorsports at the time, and a performance coach I was with said, "I bumped into a guy that says he's working for a company called Axiom, and they're looking for astronauts. Do you know anybody?" I did jump up.
That's an interesting coincidence. So go on. I'm sorry.
He was referencing a flight surgeon. He had been to a medical conference on performance, and it was a flight surgeon that worked for Axiom that had mentioned to him their program. So I was able to, through him, get his phone number and connect to the company. And then, of course, we had a phone call within 2 days then, once we were in communication.
And the process to being accepted took how long then?
It took about 6 months, I think. You know, there's a lot of medical involved, some physical testing and various qualifications that they want to hear about. And then they accepted me and offered me the job as pilot of the second mission.
All right, and you were backup on the first mission. That would be AX-1 as opposed to the mission you were on in May, which was AX-2, right?
That's right.
And so what roles did you have? What did you do for Axiom Space? There has to be more to it than just being in the pilot seat for the mission days. What all went on there?
Well, in this era of the new access to space, it's very important that, first of all, it's very important that we develop access to space on a commercialized basis. You know, for 60 years, it's been the province of governments, agencies, the U.S., Russia, European astronauts. The space station's been in orbit now 24 years. So those are the only space programs. So today, opening it to commercial endeavors is very important, and Axiom's role in working with NASA to develop the mechanism and the pathways to get people to space and learn how to do this with non-government astronauts was critical to Axiom that it be done correctly. And NASA is a very special agency. They require you to train and perform at the same level of their government astronauts. So Axiom's really nervous, or not nervous, but it's critical to them for their success that they bring people on board that want to perform. And that became my sole role. And it just so happened, you know, as a kid that had been wanting to be an astronaut for 60 years at that point, I was predisposed to perform. It was my next challenge.
What was the training process like? Physical processes? How demanding was the training?
Well, you don't sleep a lot because you think more is going to happen than is, but it's they get all the physical training done in the first 90 days or so. Once they see that, you know, you're a viable specimen, I guess is how they term it. Then they focus on classroom. So you end up spending maybe 1,600 hours in classroom time, and another 300 or 400 hours in simulator experiences just to learn systems. They require you to learn the entirety of the space station systems, which is right up my alley. I'm kind of a systems guy. I'm pretty nosy. So I want to know how things work, and I loved every minute of it. That's why I volunteered to serve as backup for AX-1. That meant I got to train twice.
Okay, I wasn't aware of this. So that was something extra you asked for. That wasn't what they were anticipating doing until you volunteered for it.
Well, they need backups, but because the first flight is the first flight, there is no group before. So because I'm not an employee, they can't tell me to do that. I volunteered, and they were happy to have that. And because their commander, which is my commander on the second flight, was automatically going to back up their commander. So I ended up being backup to the pilot of the first flight, but the other two mission specialists had no backup. So it was a role that I volunteered for, even though if either of us had to fill that in or a mission specialist had failed to qualify for some reason, the flight would have been bumped one way or the other. So it was just something that I had a chance to do, and it literally gave me exposure to Johnson Space Center and SpaceX for twice the duration, a total of about nearly 3 years. So really special for me.
So that was all a plus, right?
As a plus, yeah. So that was a win. We used to play in cardboard boxes in our side yard in the 60s, when we pretended to be astronauts, and now I got to do the real thing. So it was so amazing. The first time I walked on to the Johnson Space Center, seeing the buildings and all the things that are there, where they matched the pictures as I saw the Space Center being built. So it took my breath away the first time I walked on to Johnson Space Center.
So recap the launch day. What was that like?
Just like the simulation. So, which is unfortunate though, because you expect that launch day is going to be special, but I had to keep reminding myself that I'm really sitting on a rocket with 1 million pounds of fuel in it. But it was pretty special.
Well, although we didn't really get into this too much, you're a pilot, and have been since when? When did you get your pilot's license?
When I was 17.
It's pretty cool. And you've owned a number of planes through the years, I believe, or
I have.
yeah. And so the pilot mentality of compartmentalizing things and being task oriented and all that must serve you well. And so I think I get it. Yeah, it's just like the simulation. But were you totally divorced of emotion?
Yeah. Well, there's no real fear. I had literally watched rockets launch since I was a kid, and I could smell the rockets when I was watching them when I was a kid. And the astronauts were my heroes. They were the people sitting in capsules, flipping all those cool switches and watching systems and reading about their training. Those are the things that I studied, in essence, my whole life. So when I got a chance to actually do it, it was just a next step for me. I was eager to do it. And so going in there on launch day was just like a simulation, right up to the point of ignition. And then things start to change a little bit for you.
How rough was it?
It's not really. I was
Vibration?
Amazed. Yeah, some vibration. The first thing that you notice was there's not a blast off. What do you say, blast off? You think about getting slingshotted out. It's just, you could get a sense of the room begin to lift. There was this strange sensation like you're sitting in this launch vehicle and a crane was just slowly picking you up for the first 5 seconds. You could say, wow, we're just simply going up. It's really smooth. And then, of course, the vibrations and the resonance, and you get more power, and as you accelerate, all of that changes pretty quickly.
And then there's weightlessness or near weightlessness.
Well, that takes a while, but yes.
And you'd certainly had simulations for that, but this lasts a little longer than the rides and the parabola rides in the planes. So, what was that experience like to enjoy the weightlessness for days?
Well, first of all, the parabola rides, nobody likes those. They're called the vomit comet for a reason. Most everybody gets sick. And they don't really mimic weightlessness. There's no sense, they don't use it for practice or to train you for anything. It's just to give you a general familiarization with being weightless. And that the sense that if you push off of something, it imparts way more force to you than you imagine, because you'll go flying across the room. And that turned out to be very true. Living and working on the space station was an incredibly rewarding experience. I still dream about that. I would still be there, actually. If I had an opportunity at that moment to not leave, I would still be there today.
Well, was that experience, and I hate to get back to the word emotion, but was there something about that really tugged at you here and not up here?
Oh, yeah. The fact that I couldn't believe I was actually there every day. I'd wake up. I slept in the Dragon capsule. That's where they want the pilot to be. And I would wake up in the mornings, 6 o'clock, You open your eyes and you have to look around and remember that you're actually in space. Crawl out of your sleeping bag and slip some pants on, and then slither out into down into node 2, see who's up, and do what you'd say you do at home. You drag yourself in for that first cup of coffee. It's just like being at home, except you're floating.
So what were your roles there? What experiments were you involved in? What were your jobs on the ISS?
Well, number one job of a private astronaut is not to screw anything up. We were taught that. They said, these are all demos for NASA. NASA's trying to evaluate whether these private astronaut things are going to work, so don't screw stuff up. But we were trained endlessly with some really cool experiments, science. But I chose to make most of my science about education. We did a number of direct school outreaches, and we did some video work for comparing life on Earth to space for students. I was involved in some stem cell glove box work and some optic nerve studies. We all sign up to be human experiments of some sort, but you never really are in touch with the actual investigator who's actually doing the work. So you don't really know what the end result of the science is. You're just there as a pair of hands in the laboratory. But my real fun work was creating experiences for kids on Earth.
And that brings us back to something extremely remarkable that you've made yourself a part of now, and that's sponsoring in a very real way the STEM program at the Middlesboro schools. So share with us how you brought yourself to that and wanted to be involved in the way that you are.
Well, I went to school here, and it was really a great experience, but for some reason, I did not complete my life mission that I dreamed it would be in the very beginning. I did not, as good of a school as we had and a community, I don't think that it was prepared to foster and support an exotic dream like I had for myself at that time. Because, well, first of all, space was brand new. So when you tell someone in 1963, 4, or 5, you're going to be an astronaut, we have just barely invented the word. So there wasn't a system to support something like that. And looking back now on what I was doing for myself, then I was quite sure that there were 10-year-olds in school today that would have their own dreams that in any school system need to be realized. And knowing what I've learned of education, that it's a challenging environment, teachers are worked to the maximum, and school staff and administration are worked to solve so many different things that even involving the state and federal levels and requirements of schools, that sometimes the student's need and the vision of the student that they have for themselves gets overlooked. And there's no mechanism. So this aspect of what we call STEM education has really come into play to where it is a method of, it's actually an educational pattern that mimics, more closely represents what true life really is, what we do every day. We have to understand our environment. We have to solve problems for ourselves and others. We face situations that we have to understand that are confusing. So teaching children how to approach problems that seem insurmountable is a big deal. And STEM, whether it's the science or the technology or the engineering or the math involved, and now we like to put STEAM involved, put the A in there for the arts, which are important because they represent all the imaginative skills that are a part of all of science and technology. You cannot invent something or design something unless you can first imagine it. And every artist, every person of any sort of creative background develops imaginative skills. So teaching young people how to imagine a next step even, one simple next step is important. How to apply that and approach a large problem in their life or in their career and then separate that large problem into smaller problems and solve those individually to create the solution. STEM education, the architecture of STEM education helps do that. It helps teachers create examples that are vivid relationships that students can have with the real world. The brain's a funny thing. You know, the brain is what we're trying to do. The brain will go to sleep if it is not entertained. And if you're in school and the material is boring to you or not engaging, the students will be hounded to a test score through rote memory. And they'll be forced to meet a test score by studying the night before and hopefully provide a test score that satisfies everyone. But they haven't really learned stuff in many cases. The brain thrives on novelty, and it's the only thing that engages the brain to pay attention, something that's new. Because the brain works on, is that going to eat me or not? And it will pay attention to something that it cannot understand if it is novel in order for it to do a threat assessment. Now, use that in the form of entertainment with a student in school with something that is novel in a way we educate them by providing them examples. They actually start to pay attention, and then the learning takes care of itself. They actually like to do this. And if you can make school exciting and entertaining and teach them at the same time and become problem solvers, then we all win. They go out into the world and they learn to love learning, and that's the main goal of STEM.
I like that very much. Learn to love learning. And did you feel that in grade school, high school, or did you just you had the desire to learn? Were you at that point yet? I mean, was that part of your fabric from early on?
Well, kind of, but it didn't happen in school. We kind of did that on weekends and at night when we would build things that would either blow up or catch on fire. We did a lot of neighborhood experimentation, sometimes with human subjects.
The outside-the-box experiences.
Yeah. Well, that was our learning, and we would take that into school, and we would fish out. I think I had a couple of friends in the neighborhood, and we would actually look for examples in our lessons, and fortunately, if you have a good teacher that allows you the flexibility. Anyone remembers Mrs. Patterson in chemistry? She would let us experiment to failure, and that was great. I was in the school today, as a matter of fact, and they're doing volcanoes. And I remember the volcano I did for Mrs. Moat in junior high school, right over here in this building. I built a volcano, and today the students are using Mentos and baking soda and things like that. I used sulfur and gunpowder.
A little grittier.
And she wasn't aware of that. And when it popped and flamed and it caught the entire papier-mâché volcano on fire, I was admiring the color and the flames, and she said, "Go get a fire extinguisher." And I said, "Really? Look at this, it's cool." And she said, "No, get a fire extinguisher." So this is our 8th grade experience. So we would take the things we learned during the weekends and try to enhance our own experiments in school at the same time.
Looking back, what would be the greatest influence on your life? Who or what or what really shaped you, if you could identify one or two things?
Well, I had to start with my mother, giving me and encouraging me the freedom to explore. And then having a community and friends that supported, and everyone was of a like mind to, let's see what we can do next.
Did you ever sense limitations on you or from you?
Well, no, and that can be a problem in life. If you don't actively look for limitations. One of the problems I've always fought was having too many interests at once. and taking things to a severe extreme to find out where my edge was, where it took to broke me. And I've suffered that, forever.
Boundaries don't apply.
They're difficult for me to accept.
All right, let's see. So we're here doing this. I'm going to imagine that a few years back you couldn't imagine being this type of personal focus on you. So to the extent you're a celebrity, how are you dealing with that?
Well, I never asked for that, number one. I just wanted to go to space. I just wanted to do the things that I loved. But if it gives me a voice or
It's all good. You certainly have a grand voice, and what you're accomplishing with this STEM program in Middlesboro is just it's just unbelievable for me. And I think most all of us here in the room share a great sense of pride, and just really want to congratulate you and thank you for what you're now doing and returning to Middlesboro. And it's difficult for me to comprehend. And so let me ask you this: what are your plans for the future?
keep on stemming, I guess. We're just getting started actually here at this school, and it's a marvelous example to me because the entire district has voted in to see what they can do. It's not just we're creating a STEM class in a school. We're not just creating a STEM grade or just the middle school. The entire district here wants to see what it can do. We're a perfect size community for this to happen because we can create a voice that supports that vision in the school. And one of the, speaking back to what these things have helped me bring forward are along the way of the things I've done in my life, and more recently with astronaut and some of the community that I've been involved in. We formed some great partnerships with entities like MIT, the ISS National Laboratory, and some other notable institutions that I've been able to, only because I now have that voice, have agreed to help us improve our STEM approach, to make it very, very viable. Now you can go create a STEM class and buy a book on STEM for Dummies, or you can do online stuff and create STEM. But we now have the full attention of the MIT Media Lab and the ISS National Laboratory, who we've signed memorandum of understandings with to recognize Middlesboro as an outreach school. We're bringing a fellowship group here from the University of Texas at Austin, Dr. David Yeager, who works with Dr. Carolyn Dweck at Stanford to create and develop mindset learning cultures in our school, so where we help teachers and students learn to collaborate on learning, on how learning takes place best when you have an in-trust learning culture. And that is agnostic to the curriculum, but when you add STEM on top of that, it's like throwing fuel on a fire. So we believe we have a top winning formula here to help our schools grasp something that is very special. And if my having a voice or being recognized can be used of any value, that's the lasting, that's the coin I want to drop on that, is for that to be used for that effect. It's not about signing an autograph. I'll do that for kids all day long. And we go to a lot of schools and do that. And the most marvelous thing that I found in dealing with young people in schools today is space opens their eyes. And they already know about space, yet space is not taught in schools. They don't have a class for 7-year-olds on space. But if you ask a 7-year-old to draw you a picture of living in space, they'll draw you the most marvelous art you've ever seen. And how do they know that? It's because they're interested, and anytime they see it, they record it, and they look at it, and they study it, and then they know it. That tells us that there's a natural curiosity that people have of space exploration, and doing things of science and technology. It's novel to them, and that's what excites their minds today. So giving them more of that is what they want in order to be excited to learn. And when you do that, you can package in all the other important elements that the state wants you to teach kids and what their parents wants them to learn in form of ethics and various things. So it's a marvelous, marvelous machine, this STEM machinery to put in place. We now actually, it's now turned in not just to STEM, but to STEAM, but now also MIT has taught us to put a D on the end of that for design, because the design of and creativity is in everything that we see. So it's not about teaching kids to love to go to space or to be astronauts. It's about teaching kids to be explorers of their own self, of what is in them to bring them out. You like butterflies? There's science through all of that. There's the understanding of how to explore and how to recognize that. So getting students to learn to recognize and be willing to bring their own voice forward and not be afraid to express that is the first step that they become lifelong learners and doing what they love. And then they'll do their best work.
Your insight on the processes of young minds growing up and wanting, being attracted to space and science, I really like that. And I want to ask you, looking back on your trip to the ISS, what's the singular most memorable and enjoyable thing that went on there, or that what aspect of that is number one with a bullet for you?
Well, the space station is this marvelous vessel. It's been in orbit for 24 years. It was built through the combined effort of 22 nations, the International Space Station partners. Primarily, it's composed of the U.S. segment and the Russian segment. So at any given time, there's up to 4 U.S. astronauts and 3 Russian cosmonauts on board. It's all connected in a long, singular vehicle made up of nodes connected with little hatchways. Think of a really long submarine, and you go from one hatch into the next chamber, then through a hatch to the next chamber. Well, the Russians have the back half, which is about 50 meters long, and the U.S. has the front half, which is about 50 meters long, thereabouts. Not quite that long, but they do their work, we do our work. But occasionally, they'll pop through one of the hatches and say, do you guys want to come to dinner tonight? Invite us to dinner. Yeah, what time do you want to go? I don't know. It's like friends coming to your house saying, you got time? Want to go to dinner tomorrow night? Yeah, sure. What time is good for you? I don't know, about 6:30. No, well, I've got to finish that thing in the glove box, and then this got to work. So, okay, 7 o'clock, your place. So we go to the Russian end. We did this 2 or 3 times. They're wonderful, wonderful, hospitable friends. So off on their end, they cook something really fun to eat. We have no idea what it was, but you eat it, and you end up, at the end of the evening, Russians like to sing. So what do you like to say? One guy had a guitar. Sergei had a guitar. You know, they have all sorts of stuff up there. So they're singing Russian songs, and he finally turned to me and said, well, what song would you like us to sing? And there's 11 of us in this front little chamber, 4 from NASA, 3 from Russia, and then 4 from the Axiom crew. And I said, how about Hotel California? Well, Sergei actually knew Hotel California. And so we sat there and we pulled it up on a teleprompter, because they looked it up, got an iPad up, and I'm pretty sure we were the only people singing Hotel California on orbit that night. So that moment will live forever.
That's cool.
Russians in their Russian dialect, and so Americans to Saudi astronauts and an astronaut from the UAE, all of us singing Hotel California, whipping around the earth at 17,000 miles an hour.
Jess Ann, how are we doing on time? Can we wrap it up? All right. Well, one other thing that does come to mind, and that is the space flight now, and it is becoming, maybe you could say, more commercial with players like Axiom. What do you see as the positives about the way it has evolved? And for that matter, what's the downsides of going that way?
Of going to space at all, or
No, that it becoming less state-sponsored, but more business or private enterprise-sponsored, or.
That's marvelous. The upside is, we're providing more access to space. All this was generally kicked off in large part by SpaceX and the development of reusable vehicles. That's what got a lot of this really going. Otherwise, NASA would still be going up using the Russian launch vehicle because the shuttle's down. So getting more people to space, creating a broader access for commercialization, the advent that NASA now has mandated that they want to leave LEO, which is low Earth orbit, and concentrate on going to the moon and then later Mars. They want to hand over low Earth orbit to commercial installations, commercial service providers. The space station will come out of orbit in 7 years and be replaced by 2 or 3 commercial platforms, such as what Axiom is building. And when that happens, the access to space will become faster, cheaper, and provide multiple platforms on a commercial basis that companies, pharmaceuticals, we can develop chemicals in space, metallurgy, all the things that microgravity has already been found to change the characteristics of. We learn more about ourselves. NASA now is pushing to create a lunar colony and a lunar space station, and eventually we will go to Mars. So the upside here is this availability is letting us learn how to live, exist, and operate in space on a big scale. And the scale up is challenging, but that's part of what our early missions were about. We're helping to create that method of what are the challenges in sending ordinary people to space on short duration flights or long duration flights. So the upside is humanity is going to learn a lot. We've already learned a lot in 60 years. We're going to now learn how to live interplanetary. The downside, eventually you have to come home. But eventually there'll be the first child will be born in space eventually. So all of the things that we're trying to do start now. In fact, when you go to a class, and I realized this, when I realized this, it about knocked me down. I was standing in a class of 4th graders, and I realized all the faces and the eyes of the kids I was looking at, I was potentially looking at Martian astronauts. And if you go to any 4th grade class today, those are the people that in 20, 25 years will be running this planet. They're not school kids. They are the people that will be making the decisions for the next generation. So teaching them how to be solid performers and how to solve problems and how to engage with this brave new world of whatever they want to do is hugely important.
Thanks for all that, John. And you are certainly a unique individual from this unique community, and what you are giving back to this community, still I just find it amazing. And thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of everyone here in this entire community. The way you are reaching out and giving back is so special. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And by the way, this is astronaut 598 here, number 598. There was 597 before him. There will be a few after, I imagine, maybe more than a few. And how do you feel about that designation, by the way? Is that just a number?
It's a number, but I'm happy to have any number, actually.
And very special thanks this evening to Jess Ann and the Bell County Historical Society for providing this forum, and for you folks for being here to listen to John and his description of his life's experiences and life's works and what he hopes to continue to accomplish. Anything else you want to offer before we turn this back over to Jess Ann?
This is a marvelous community, and we have the proof behind us of the legacy and all the individuals, like all of you here tonight. All of you have contributed to this marvelous development we've had and who we are. And we sometimes like to blame the big world out there for being busy and our kids not doing this or doing that. But at one point, we were the ones that were being blamed for not paying attention and doing what we're supposed to do. Yet we seem to have brought it together and made something out of it. So this community has a lot of value, and it hasn't lost anything other than the world has gotten busier. So I'd like to congratulate all of you for keeping this community thriving and the work that many of you are doing to help make it better every day. So I just hope to do a small part in addition to that. Thank you.
Thanks, John Shoffner.